Hello and welcome to Just Jets episode number 205. What is going on? I am Matt O'Leary. I'm going to be hanging out with you for another episode of my favorite episode that I get to record every single week, Just Jets, where we talk with you guys, the fans. We got a couple of voicemails. We have a few topics to get into. I'm excited about it. We're going to start with under the radar free agencies, get into Joe Tippmann being honored, as well as your voicemails to close out this lovely program that we call Just Jets. So let's get rocking and rolling again. This time we are going to get into something that I'm excited to talk about, which is something that my good buddy Richie from Jets Media tweeted out. If you're not following Richie on YouTube, Twitter, X, Instagram, wherever else you can get him, make sure to do so. There are very few more positive people on this planet than Richie, my good buddy. Excited to do shows with him every Thursday on the Jets Roundtable. But he tweets out, name an under-the-radar free agent that you would like the Jets to sign. Because we all know the names, right? There's a bunch of guys being floated around in free agency as it's... it's that time of year where everyone is going to get their names out there, and these are the guys that I like, these are the guys that I don't like as much, and there's a lot of people whose names come up a lot and others who would fall under that category, the under the radar category. But what I wanted to do was give you a few responses as well as my own answer at the end of this. So how do we start this and not talk about Sauce Gardner getting in on the mix? Yes, that's right. The Sauce Gardner, two-time All-Pro, Defensive Rookie of the Year. Sauce Gardner, he chimed in and gave two names on who he thinks the New York Jets should look to add. And that was Calvin Ridley and T. Higgins. Holy smokes, would I like for the New York Jets to have those guys on their team. I like this GM Sauce Gardner almost as much as I like cornerback Sauce Gardner. But the chances of the Jets being able to land both guys, pretty slim. But let's talk through it. There's a chance that they could land one of those two guys, and I think Sauce gives two pretty good answers. So Calvin Ridley in his first year back signed a one-year deal with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Played down there with Trevor Lawrence in his first year, put up 1,016 yards and 8 touchdowns. That, to me, would be a very nice complementary piece to go with Garrett Wilson. He has number one receiver upside, Calvin Ridley does. But when you pair him with someone who is as good as Garrett Wilson, that only opens him up a little bit more. And also, it's like not like you can completely ignore Calvin Ridley. So the Jets then would get more opportunities to go to Garrett Wilson. If not Calvin Ridley, T. Higgins is a name that we all really like a lot. He was a 2020 draft pick taken with the first pick in the second round by the Cincinnati Bengals. This past year in 12 games had 656 yards. He had 5 touchdowns in those 12 games. Prior to this year, he had 3 straight 900-plus yard seasons, and he is just 25 years old. I like T. Higgins a lot. I think he is, a good jump ball guy, has a good connection with Joe Burrow. They obviously have to pay. They pay Joe Burrow, and they're going to have to pay Jamar Chase. The chances of them being able to pay both Chase and Higgins big money, probably pretty slim. But man, the thought of Higgins for the next, 3-4 years playing with Garrett Wilson, and Garrett Wilson entering his prime, and T. Higgins becoming a free agent at 25 years old is a good thing. It's not like you're paying a receiver, big money at 30 years old. And I think specifically, like, Higgins is going to get paid. If he hits the market, he's going to get some pretty big money. Trading for Davante Adams, he's a little bit on the older side, and you have to give up a draft pick. I would still be willing to do it at the right price, but some people are weary of that. If you're looking for a potential high upside guy that might be a little bit cheaper than the T. Higgins of the world, or giving up assets in the NFL draft to trade for Davante Adams, the Calvin Ridley name's an interesting one. Again, 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns. He's a little bit older. He's 29, but doesn't have the same wear and tear on his body because He didn't play at all in 2022 and missed 5 games, or only played in 5 games, in 2021. So Calvin Ridley is a real interesting one. I don't know if I would put him as my number one choice for the Jets to land at wide receiver. I also like Michael Pittman a lot, but Calvin Ridley would be, again, like I said, an interesting pivot point for this New York Jets team, and they might very well have to do that. We have a couple more that we will go into before I give my answer on it, because why wouldn't I give my answer on it? It's my show. Why not? Why wouldn't I get involved? Carlos says Saquon Barkley. This is one that I don't necessarily agree with, because I think he's one. I wouldn't want to spend that kind of money on RB2. The Jets just brought in what was supposed to be a high-end, expensive veteran RB2, former number 1 running back, Saquon Barkley, around the same age as what Dalvin Cook was. He was coming off his deal, 962 yards this year, 6 touchdowns in 14 games. Wasn't really utilized a ton as a pass catcher. We know how good he can be out of the backfield. I think his first 2 years, they did a much better job of getting him the football. His rookie year was his best year by far, which usually tends to happen with running backs. Running back's the rare position where you come in and you do everything in your first 4 or 5 years in the league, and then after that, it really slows down. And Saquon's reaching that point. He's, again, 962 yards, 6 touchdowns in 14 games is respectable numbers, right? And he's 27, or will be 27 relatively soon. I just don't think that would be the way that I'd want the Jets to spend their money in free agency. I wouldn't, if you're going to sign a running back instead of drafting another one, like Breece Hall, Izzy Abanikanda are going to be here. They need one more. And I would go with a cheaper route rather than someone like Saquon, who's probably going to be, if not $10 million, up closer to that in the $8 million a year plus range. I would rather sign someone in the $2 to $3 million range if you're going with that veteran option. I wouldn't want to spend, potentially 3 times that on someone like Saquon, although a talented player. There's no denying that Saquon's, not talented, but I just don't. I think there's some similar worries with Saquon at this point and the mileage on him, and him coming in and being the Jets RB2 behind Breece Hall. So I would pass on Saquon. Big name, I understand it, but I would say no. I'm gonna say hard pass for me. NY Jokes is up next. He says Darnell Savage, so a safety. The Jets very likely could let Jordan Whitehead go in free agency. He signed a 2-year deal. Had the big 3 interception game in week 1 against Josh Allen. My biggest criticism for Jordan Whitehead has been his missed tackles. Every year it feels like those are a really high number. He missed this past season 18% of his tackles, which again is pretty high. But Darnell Savage missed 18.5% of his tackles, so even more so. I'm really good with the poor tackling safeties. Savage is, I think he had a good year this past year. The 2 years before this weren't great. He's a little too streaky for me. I don't think I would pay that. I think it would be similar money that Savage would get to what the Jets paid Jordan Whitehead. Something like $6 million, $7-8 million a year. I would rather bring back Chuck Clark on a 1-year deal, even though he missed time. I get that, but he is much more of a sure tackler, and I think is a better 1-for-1 replacement of Whitehead. I think you have Tony Adams at free safety. Bring back Ashton Davis on the cheap. I guess if my options are just Darnell Savage or use the same money that Darnell Savage would get and bring back both Chuck Clark and Ashton Davis, I would rather go that route than the one player who I'm not convinced is that much better than Chuck Clark, if he is even better than Chuck Clark. So I'm not in on that one. Slashy says Robert Hunt. Now, this one I like for 2 reasons. One, because the Jets need significant help on the offensive line, and Hunt is one of the best right guards in football, but also it weakens the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins are in a spot where they've made the playoffs in back-to-back years. They got bounced in the first round in back-to-back seasons, to the Kansas City Chiefs this year, to the Buffalo Bills the year prior. And they're kind of in this zone where it's like, what are they going to do? Are they going to go all in with Tua, continue to push the chips to the table? They're going to reset. Their cap situation isn't ideal, but there's always ways to get around it, restructure guys, cut guys. But if they lose Robert Hunt in free agency and he goes to the New York Jets, like that's one of the things that I like to look at in free agency is what happens with your division rivals. And if they're losing, a top 10 guard. If you want to just isolate right guard, maybe he's a little bit higher than that. Yeah, that significantly weakens the Dolphins, and that's the blindside guard to Tua. So maybe that is something that comes into play here as well on that one. But I like Robert Hunt. That would be someone that I'd be in on. That's not a name I see brought up a lot. Zeitler is a name that you see all the time at guard. That would be big fish hunting. But I guess that's a good transition to get into mine, because my under-the-radar guy who doesn't get talked about a lot is Graham Glasgow from the Detroit Lions. If you saw my Fixing the New York Jets video, I signed him to a contract to play right guard. He's played right guard, left guard, and center in his career. He's played all three. He's a great run blocker, which... Again, I know that the Jets could look to improve in pass protection, which is obviously something that they need to do. But how many times have we talked about it now that the identity of this Jets team, and specifically with Robert Saleh, is they want to run the ball. And when they're at their best, they're doing that. And, if you sign a Glasgow, let's say, you sign Glasgow, AVT to play right guard, AVT plays right tackle, you draft Fashanu to play left tackle, Joe Tippmann's your center, and you're either bringing back Laken Tomlinson or replacing him with another guard. That offensive line's going from like 32 to now you're looking like, hey, can this be a top 20 offensive line? Look, I don't think it's going to go from 32 to 1 overnight. I don't think that's fair. But if they could salvage this line and be league average to even if it's slightly below average, I'm not talking like go from 32 to 29. That's not enough of a jump. But if they go from like 32 to 18 to 20 even, that would be enough of a jump where I think it makes a difference because of who's playing quarterback. The Jets had Zach Wilson at quarterback and Tim Boyle and Trevor Siemian. If you don't think quarterback play impacts the offensive line, I don't know what to tell you. It does. It's a mutual relationship. The offensive line also impacts quarterback play, but it is also the other way around too. So Graham Glasgow is my guy for that. I like him and kind of think of like when the Jets brought in Alan Faneca at the end of his career. Now, I'm not saying that Graham Glasgow is going to the Hall of Fame like Alan Faneca, but similar guy, short term, 2-year kind of deal. Finish his career out with the New York Jets at a veteran presence, a good run blocker to pair with Elijah Vera Tucker. That could be a lot of fun. All right, let's get into the second thing that I wanted to do in this episode, which is Joe Tippmann being named to the all-rookie team as a center. So one of the best centers, especially for rookies in 2023. I thought he had an up and down rookie year, but overall very promising. He allowed 3 sacks, 20 pressures in 14 games. He played 3 games at right guard, then played the other 11 at center. 8 penalties is a little bit on the higher side. That's something that he absolutely has to clean up. I think even he would admit that. But and also he has to improve with his shotgun snaps. Sometimes they could run a little high. It happened a couple of times this year. But overall, promising rookie season from him. And a pick that was very criticized in August when Joe Tippmann was running with the threes. And it was, oh, my God, they should have taken John Michael Schmitz. And this kid is, going to be running with the third stringers and practice squad guys. He can't even surpass, Connor McGovern and Wes Schweitzer and guys like that. And lo and behold, he ends up starting his first game in week 3. So that didn't last very long. He had a very, very good preseason. So he climbed up the depth charts. And obviously, clearly, he did not have the same rookie season that a guy like Sauce Gardner had, because Sauce won Defensive Rookie of the Year and was an All-Pro. But if you go back with this regime, it's something that they do. They make all their rookies earn it. Like, Sauce Gardner was not originally a starter, which was crazy. You knew that on week 1 he was going to end up being a starter, and he was great all year. But kind of the same thing with Joe Tippmann is it took him a little bit. And again, the entirety of the offensive line wasn't pretty. And some of his numbers, like, they're not eye-popping, like, oh my God, this guy's a stud right now. But I think he showed that he was capable at 2 positions, at guard or center. I would just let him be, and, let him be at center. That's, where he was drafted to be. But I would make that choice this year, kind of like what they want to do with Elijah Vera-Tucker. They want to decide if he's a tackle or if he's a guard, right? What do you do with Elijah Vera-Tucker? They should do the same thing with Joe Tippmann. Because while it's so nice that he could bounce around and play different spots on the offensive line, getting just the same unit out there and playing together every week and building chemistry, like, that stuff matters. They played 17 games this year, and how many different offensive line combinations did they have? That's going to impact line play also. So Tippmann, either figure it out. Do you want him to play center? Do you want him to play right guard? Pick one and then let him go from there. Showed signs as a really good run blocker. Probably could improve a little bit in pass protection. No denying that, but a promising rookie season. And he was the first center off the board and taken over John Michael Schmidt. So Joe Douglas, went outside the box with that one. And obviously, this is not, victory lapping and saying that he's going to be, he's going to the Hall of Fame and JMS is a bust. That's not true. That's not the case. But there's a reason why the Jets liked Joe Tippmann so much. He was younger than JMS. He was more athletic than JMS. JMS older, more pro ready. That was my take on it at the time. But they loved Tippmann's athleticism, and I think he showed that off in his rookie season and showed why he has a chance to be a very good starter for this team for a long time, which they need that, man. It would be really nice to just find a long-term starting offensive lineman, because it feels like there's just so much turnover with this offensive line. Ever since they lost, Brigashaw Ferguson retires after 2015, Mangold retires after 2016, and ever since then, from 2017 to now, it's been a rotating cast of characters. They've been trying to find long-term answers across the offensive line, and they really haven't been able to do it. They haven't. They spent, a first-round pick on Mekhi Becton. He's probably not coming back. Elijah Vera-Tucker was a first-round pick. I love AVT. But this line is still not fixed yet. And they've spent, Joe Tippmann, a second-round pick. They've put a lot of draft assets, and they paid money in free agency. They paid up for a boatload of money for Laken Tomlinson. They brought in Dwayne Brown on a 1-year deal. They've done things, but they haven't brought in the right pieces, and that is something that has to change. And I'm hoping that Joe Tippmann and Elijah Vera-Tucker, those 2 young guys, are a part of this team for a very, very long time going forward. I think both of those players are going to be important pieces to this team, and hopefully they stay healthy. So with that, let's get into your voicemails for this week. We will first go out to PG from Long Island. He wants to talk about all the reasons why the Jets aren't in the playoffs. Okay, let's go.
Hello, Matt O'Leary, PG from Long Island, calling you on Friday night before the playoff games. But of course, I'm calling about the Jets, and the Jets are not in the playoffs.
No.
I'm talking a couple of reasons why, and first reason is Robert Saleh. He stinks. He's in over his head as the head coach. The team constantly gets out-coached. They get blown out, and they come unprepared. He's in over his head, in my opinion, as a head coach. I understand the mulligan that Johnson gave both him and Douglas because of the Aaron Rodgers injury and the Aaron Rodgers influence, but the fact is, we have another year. Let's see what happens. I'm not optimistic. Speaking about Joe Douglas, I've been a big supporter of his, but his tenure with the Jets has been like a microcosm of the Bryce Huff situation. He signed Bryce Huff as an undrafted free agent. Great move, developed him. and now they're going to lose him. He's not going to be signed with the Jets. He's made that clear. The best they can do is hope for a tag and sign trade, which is going to be hard to pull off. Maybe they can get a second-round pick and save some face, but that's going to be difficult. Let's see what happens. Douglas started off great. The Sam Darnold trade, the Adams trade, great work. 2022 draft, of course, tremendous. But here's the thing. Lately, he has stunk. The free agent signings, the guys from Green Bay, the guy from Kansas City, and you can don't blame the Green Bay guys on Aaron Rodgers because it's Douglas' decision. The Dalvin Cook signing, horrible. Having Wilson as a backup quarterback, not bringing somebody else in, horrible. Relying on an injured, and really just underperformed tackle this year, plus a 38-year-old tackle who never really made the field, except for the first couple of games. Just horrible. He's just done a bad job lately as the GM. And again, started off really well, very optimistic, but the things he's done lately has made me scratch my head. And unfortunately, I'm an optimistic Jets fan usually, but I think a year from now, I would be calling you when we were talking about who to bring in as the GM, and then after that, the coach. Maybe Aaron Rodgers can save the day. Let's hope for it, but really, I'm not really expecting much. I think we're going to be back here next year looking for new leadership. Anyway, your thoughts on that, and as always, go Jets.
Yeah, PG, I really appreciate that. Appreciate the call in there. And you bring up some good points. Like Robert Saleh, I don't think has shown enough growth at head coach, which is frustrating because I think he's an easy person to root for. He's a likable guy, which is a big difference and a big change from Adam Gase. Like Adam Gase was bad and unlikable. Robert Saleh has been bad, but mostly likable. And he did a fantastic job with the defense. You know, an elite unit the last 2 years. Defensive staff is built out really nice, but still way too conservative, especially on the offensive side of the ball. His game management could use work. There's been times where they've been unprepared to play in pretty much must-win games. Last year in Seattle on the road, big example of that. This past year in Miami got blown out. So there's a couple of times where, you know, they were put in a big spot. This team was in a big spot and they came out flat and they did not play, you know, very good at all. So that's absolutely a red flag. I do think that, and you were fair with this, PG. So, you know, I'm not saying I'm just saying in general. In general, I feel like, although it's starting to change more recently, but it felt like for a while that you had Robert Saleh as the scapegoat and Joe Douglas, like he was fine. It was really the coach. But this year, I put a lot of the blame on Joe Douglas for the reasons that you stated. His plan on the offensive line and at backup quarterback were horrific. All offseason and into the summer, I said that the offensive line is a very volatile position for this team. It has a chance where if everything breaks right, it could be good. Meaning, Mekhi Becton stays healthy and goes back to playing like he did as a rookie. Elijah Vera-Tucker is healthy. Joe Tippmann comes in and is good right away. You get Laken Tomlinson bounce back to where he was as a Pro Bowler, and a healthy Dwayne Brown, you know, is closer to what he looked like in his prime. But I said they don't have a lot of wiggle room. It could either, if everything breaks right, it could be an okay unit. They could be fine. I don't think they'll be great, but middle of the road. And if the injuries start coming and if things don't break right, it can get ugly. And unfortunately, it did, and very, very, very quickly. Dwayne Brown was horrible the first 2 weeks of the year. And then he goes on IR and is pretty much done. But that he wasn't ready and didn't practice for most of training camp. That was a big red flag. They didn't really do anything with Mekhi Becton until way late with him starting reps. I know that they were trying to ramp him up. It was left side, then it was the right side, then it was the left side, and trying to figure that out. That wasn't ideal. Max Mitchell, Billy Turner were getting cooked in training camp. That should have been a sign. Laken Tomlinson did not improve. He was streaky at best. There was a stretch where he was okay at some points, but I thought it started poor and ended poor. And Connor McGovern got hurt, and Joe Tippmann was, streaky as a rookie, and, injuries take over. But the backup quarterback one, you say that you got to reset Zach Wilson, and then you have him be QB2, and it gets thrown out right back into the fire, which made zero sense. Was not aggressive at all at the trade deadline or after Aaron Rodgers goes down to either bring in a quarterback or an offensive lineman or like any of that. So, and also a great one that really wasn't referenced that I think is worthwhile to bring up is after Corey Davis officially retires on the eve of the season. Does that stink? Yeah, it does. It really stinks that was the case, but clearly something was going on with Corey Davis where he felt the need to step away and be with his family. I respect that for him. I'm not, saying that, Corey's a bad guy, none of that stuff. Corey Davis is a respectable guy, good human being. He had something going on, in his personal life where he felt like the need to step away from football and step away from $10 million. That's a lot. That you'd have to imagine that something serious is going on. And instead of pivoting and signing someone or trading for someone or doing anything, he goes, we're good with what you got. Randall Cobb had to play early in the year. Wasn't very good. Allen Lazard becomes wide receiver 2. Did not play very well. And it goes on from there. So I think, both those things are true. And I hope, really, really, really hope that a year from now we are not talking about who the next GM and coach is going to be for this team. I hope that Aaron Rodgers gets them to the playoffs and they win a playoff game because, look, I've been doing this a long time now. This is the 5th year that I've covered the Jets on YouTube. I've been doing content in some capacity since 2015, but we're talking, a small-time website that, I was writing blogs for and doing video for in college, and I'd be like, oh, like 50 people read my blog. That's awesome. And now, 9 years later, it's became a full-time thing for me, which is just so insane. And I'm so blessed for that. But we've covered a lot of bad football is the point. I mean, this on YouTube really picked up in 2019 when Adam Gase was hired and into 2020, which I thought that would be the floor, and that would be the worst that it would get, but they haven't made the playoffs still. They have the longest active streak in the NFL of missing the playoffs, so that has to end. It has to end. Let's close out. We got one more phone call, another voicemail. Peter from the beautiful Hudson Valley wants to talk offensive line. Peter, what do you got?
Hey, Matt. It's Peter from up in the beautiful Hudson Valley. Warmer Hudson Valley this week ahead than last week's cold snap. Talking about the offensive line this week. Ran out of time at the first call, so hopefully I'll get it in this time. I'd like to see the Jets get 2 players in free agency. One, Illuminor or Onwenu at tackle, and fill one of the tackle positions right away. But I think they could cut Laken Tomlinson and save at least $8 million and bring in someone cheaper and better in either Ezra Cleveland or Dalton Reisner, and that would fill the left guard position. Then you get to the draft, and at 10, if Fashanu or Falaga is available, you draft one of them, and you get a tackle that's going to be there for the next 10, 12 years. And I also think one of your mocks had the Jets taking Zach Zinter.
Yep.
So he'd be a nice backup guard option that can sit for a season or 2 and possibly come in because maybe only sign Cleveland or Reisner for 1 year, on a cheap deal. So I think that would get the line pretty much set from Illuminor, Cleveland or Reisner, Tippmann, AVT, and then say Falaga or Fashanu at right tackle, and that would take care of everything. Obviously, still need some quality backups. It seems Mekhi Becton might still be under contract to the Jets because he's not listed as a free agent on one of the sites I see. Either way, if let's say he is a free agent, as most expect, maybe he comes back on a cheap deal and becomes proper swing tackle for the Jets just because nobody else wants to sign him. But I really would also want to see him play right tackle and be a road grader with AVT on the right side, for the run game. Of course, the other thing I think that we need to prioritize, and you've mentioned it as well as others, pay Bryce Huff Please, Joe Douglas, pay him and get him back. We need him. He should be on the defensive line next year and going for the next 3 or 4 years going forward. So hopefully we'll see how those things shake out. As always, go Jets.
I appreciate it, Peter. Thank you so much for checking in. Yeah, Mekhi, so they didn't pick up his 5th-year option, so this is after his 4th year. He will be a free agent. I am very, very curious to see what happens with Mekhi. I would be surprised if the Jets bring him back. I don't think they do. I think someone will pay him close to $10 million on a 1-year deal and say we could fix him. We could, we saw flashes as a rookie. Last year was just on a really bad offensive line. He's gonna play either left or right tackle somewhere. I think someone will pay up. That's how it goes in free agency. Plus, with his response or take on Keith Carter, and he's still here, unless Keith Carter is going to get fired in the next few weeks here. We just assume that Keith Carter is staying. I don't know. I don't know what that plan is there, or if he would want to come back and play for Keith Carter. I love all the names that you brought up in free agency as well, and the draft. I think make a lot of sense. Some takes and some slight changes that I would make. At tackle, there's not a ton of tackle free agents that I like, but you mentioned 2 who I think will be a little bit cheaper than Tyron Smith, who is 33 years old and has missed a ton of time due to injury. David Bakhtiari, who's missed a ton of time due to injury. Trent Brown, who's a little overrated and has missed time due to injury. Luminor and Onwenu are 2 guys who I think would be a touch on the cheaper side and should be able to play right tackle, I think, pretty comfortably. If the Jets draft Fashanu, he's going to start at left tackle. He has 2 years starting experience at Penn State and is the most pass pro ready offensive tackle, I think, in this class. If it ends up being Fuaga, he is such a better run blocker, and I think he would probably have to play on the right side, at least at first. That's not enough to deter me from taking him because, think about it. The last time this happened with the New York Jets, they passed on Tristan Wirfs, who was exclusively a right tackle at Iowa and then ends up playing an elite level at right tackle for a couple of years, switched over to left tackle, and guess what? Is still an elite player at left tackle. So I wouldn't let that scare me off from drafting him, but if it came down to it, I did a video yesterday on this topic. If the Jets are on the clock and both Fashanu and Fuaga are available, and you're taking an offensive tackle, right? I don't know how you pass on Fashanu. And I like Fuaga a lot. I'm very high on him. I think he would be worthy of the pick at pick number 10. If Fashanu isn't there and Alt isn't there, I would be comfortable drafting him. But I just think with Fashanu's pass pro, ability to where it is right now is impressive. And that's only going to get better. And while he's lacking a little bit in the run game, I think that's an area that he can improve. He's so young. He is so young. And to find someone who's that good, and let's be honest, pass pro is more important than run blocking in today's NFL. As much as I love those road graders, I think that would be the move. But I appreciate it. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in and calling in to the episode. I appreciate it. Make sure to subscribe wherever you get the show, either in audio form or on YouTube. Once again, I am Matt O'Leary, and I'll catch you next time.